Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 33, The Major Disagreement, Pure Positive versus Balanced Training. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. My name is Mariano, that's Brent. We want to thank you guys so much for listening, and I do want to let you know that you can find us on all major social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all by searching Dog Trainers Podcast. It's all one word, it's at Dog Trainers Podcast, as well as all major podcast platforms, right? Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and all that good stuff. Now, we also want to give a shout out to some cities that have been giving us some love lately. So what's up to Atlanta, Georgia, Kensington, New York, Lake Stevens, Washington, and Flagstaff, Arizona. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate how receptive you've been to our content, and we're going to do our best to keep pumping out some good stuff for you. So this here is episode 33, The Major Disagreement Between Pure Positive Trainers and Balanced Dog Trainers. And Brent and I have noticed, we've always kind of been aware of this, and this was one of the biggest motivators for starting this podcast, was there can be a lot of heated disagreement in the two camps of training, right? And, you know, I know that everybody's got their points and a lot of them are valid. And we just wanted to start this as a way to have these conversations, minus all the negativity and all the craziness, to figure out and get to the bottom of what actually helps dogs. And so before we dive right in, I just wanted to give a quick invitation to our listeners, because you guys have been really great lately about just giving us feedback, you know, messaging us or otherwise emailing us. Do us this favor. Brent and I do reach out to a lot of trainers. You know, there are a lot of guests who you haven't heard from on DTP who we have reached out to. And it's either because they're busy, you know, some haven't gotten back to us, some have and just didn't want to be on. And we're not here to name any names or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But help us out with this if you could. If there's a pure positive trainer out there who would be interested in talking to us, not arguing, just talking to us, you know, having a very civil conversation about these different, you know, methodologies and where we agree and where we disagree, because this would be helpful. Please reach out to them on our behalf. Let us know, or just send us a message of who they are and we can reach out to them. But we really want to have these conversations, and I'm going to let Brent dive into that a little further. So over to you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for throwing that over to me. As Mariano was saying, guys, the whole purpose of this podcast is to kind of create this forum of information where we can choose, you know, we can choose what we want to add to our repertoire and our toolbox. You know, me being a dog trainer for a while, you know, even myself, I've gone through a lot of different evolutions and, you know, the different pendulum swings where, you know, I focused more on the, you know, more maybe like a pressure side. And then I focused more on a food side, and I focused more on a motivation side. And so, you know, I'm no way, even though I've been doing this for a while, and there's many trainers who've been doing this twice as long as me, 3 times as long as me. They're very experienced, but they will always tell you that we are still students. And what we're always trying to do is we're trying to find out what is the type of dog training that we want to identify ourselves with, right? But there still happens to be these polarized camps, right? Pure positive versus balanced dog training. Now, in some of our other episodes that we had with like Tyler Muto and you know, Tommy Davis and Michael Ellis, you know, we talked about that the balanced dog training spectrum, in essence, is actually a very broad spectrum, right? We would even say that, you know, other old school methodologies of dog training have actually now fallen into the balanced training camp, because, you know, even if you've been working with no pressure for the last 40 years, I'm sure definitely by now you probably use a couple treats here and there, and that might, in your opinion, qualify you enough to call yourself a balanced dog trainer, right? So we're gonna get into some of these arguments, because I was talking to Mariano the other day, and I was like, "What are we arguing about? Like, what is it all that we're arguing about?" And I'm like, "We're not arguing about commands. We're not arguing about certain management tools and protocols. We're not arguing, you know, over, you know, the owner's responsibilities on stuff, you know." So I said, what is it that we're arguing about? So we kind of just jotted down a couple of our thoughts to try and present this to you guys, to not convince you of anything, because by no means are we authority in pure positive or in balanced dog training, but really it's just to start this conversation and get our brains flowing a little bit on these concepts, because at the end of the day, if we can push the needle forward a little bit, we can help a lot more dogs. If we are a little bit more thoughtful of our dog training. All right.
100%.
So here we go. Let's get into where we all agree. So both camps of dog training, where do we both agree? Mariano, shoot.
Well, I think that where we can all agree is that modern dog training in all of its forms has definitely evolved quite significantly over the years. I think that pure positive trainers and balanced trainers alike can look at training footage from 20, 30, 40 years ago and say, yeah, we don't really do that anymore. We know a lot more now. And even when you consider dog training like as a technical skill aside, just the world of dog training is so different. And we've talked about this with like Tyler and Michael Ellis and stuff like that. We kind of liken that to people like Cesar Milan, who was a balanced dog trainer, I guess, you would consider, or a dominant, whatever. But no matter what type of trainer you are, the landscape of dog training overall has been very much changed because of people like him, right?
Yeah.
Some other things that we can all agree on: the importance of timing in training a dog, making sure that you're very clearly helping the dog understand exactly what you're rewarding for or correcting for. That needs to be understood. Otherwise, there can be no repeatability on the part of the dog. And by that same token, something else we can all agree on: consistency is absolutely key. There's no way around that. I don't even really think I need to explain that one very much. And also, I think we can agree that good dog training is definitely a matter of controlling for variables so that we understand exactly what it is that the dog is struggling with, as opposed to just throwing things at them in some random order and then we don't know what's what.
Yeah, I think just the basic idea of scaffolding in general, like every camp understands some form of scaffolding, right? Make it easy, make it a little harder, make it even a little harder than that. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely some people who think, you see a problem, go towards it and correct it and break it and end it. And, with certain behaviors, it is possible to see results in that scenario, but it's always what we're looking at is the longevity of that behavior. Other things that we are looking at is something we all agree on as dog trainers, is there's certain behaviors we want to incentivize or reward, or we want to create, we want that thing to occur again in the future. So we want to reinforce behaviors, right? And then we want to decentivize unwanted behaviors, right? Or find a way to punish those particular behaviors, right? So reinforcement and punishment, all of these things exist. However, when we get into operant conditioning a little bit later, we're going to see that not both camps use all quadrants of operant conditioning equally, and not all camps use classical conditioning equally, right? So that's definitely something, but we agree that we need to either reinforce or punish certain behaviors. Also, how dogs learn, over the last 15, 20 years, I would say last 15 years, there's been a huge shift in the dog training world, especially with marker systems, right? I don't know the exact history of it, but definitely we know marker training started, way back with aquatic animal training. Karen Pryor came and brought it with clicker training to the dog training world. And then the idea of marking with sounds just became super popularized. And now we are in a generation of voice markers and verbal markers, right? So yes, good, nope, break, all these different things that we use as an actual marker to tell the dog that they're doing something correctly, or to tell the dog that they need to try again, or that they're doing something wrong, right? So I think across the board, balance or positive reinforcement only, or pure positive trainers, they are using marker and marker systems for sure. And I think the very last one that we could come up with is that owner and clients do play a huge role in the ultimate overall outcome and success of the dog, right? Dog trainers on both camps, we can shape behaviors, we can develop behaviors, but the only way that those behaviors stick for the rest of the dog's life is if the owners actually play a huge role in that dog's life in order to make it work. So yeah, those are the things that we agree on.
Absolutely. So with that being said, I think it's worthwhile, and we, Brent and I were trying to figure out how to best present this so that it makes sense to people who are just kind of listening, and for those of you guys who don't know, it is kind of tough presenting an argument like this, or let alone two arguments without like the help of visual aids. So, so just kind of bear with us. So we figured we'd break it down like this. Now that we've talked about what we can all agree on, we're going to go over the ideals of the two different camps of the dog training world and what their argument for their method or against the other method is. And then we'll round it out with what we think it ultimately boils down to. Okay.
Right.
So we'll start with pure positive. And I think,
well, can I take that one?
oh, sure. Go for it.
Okay, I'll take pure positive. So, so a lot of these things on this list, we've either heard these arguments before, or we can actually put ourselves in the shoes of a positive reinforcement or a pure positive trainer, and understand where they're coming from. I think that's the thing. Again, these may not be all the arguments that they have. These are definitely the ones that are the most familiar to us. So I think the very first argument a pure positive trainer would have is what they're using as far as motivation, right? They don't believe in using any type of force or pressure, so therefore they kind of have a force-free mentality, right? Sometimes it can just be as simple as, I'm not going to give a dog a reward to punish a behavior. It could also be as extreme as, I don't even tell the dog no or have any negative markers because I don't want to associate that with the type of work. But yeah, so being force free, no pressure, no corrections, no yelling, no screaming. And I can definitely understand why those are, why that happens, because on the other side of the spectrum, as a dog trainer for a while, I've seen people who are too heavy handed, people who are, too correction happy, people who are breaking dog spirits, people who are, correcting with horrible timing, and it actually confuses the hell out of the dog. So I've definitely seen those things. So I definitely understand force free as an ideal. And so that's one thing that pure positive people believe in for sure. Corrections can cause emotional trauma to dogs. Also, this is definitely a something that again I've seen as a dog trainer, so I definitely understand that that is possible. However, there are also corrections that don't. Right, that's definitely something, my own opinion. But let me stick to the pure positive perspective. Another one would be owners. Owners can't do. Actually, I don't understand this note.
Owners can't do corrections correctly, or at least owners can mess up a correction, which therefore would lend itself to like a misuse of a correction can cause emotional trauma to a dog.
Got it. Okay, that's what you meant. Okay, so this one is, yeah. So pretty much corrections can't be. They're not easy to do. Pretty much. So owners can mess them up, sometimes making things worse. So we'd rather just not use them altogether because it's possible to actually mess things up a little bit more. So I've heard that one before. Let's see. If the dog needs a correction, this is something I've heard before a lot. If the dog actually is in need of a correction, then that means you haven't done enough foundational work or training prior to putting the dog in that situation, right? Which I guess I totally understand that to an extent as well. If I'm putting my dog into a situation where they're constantly failing, well, that means I haven't done enough prep work. So I totally understand that argument for sure. One that I hear a lot that's really funny, or not funny, but just it's an interesting perspective because again, I've seen this happen, so it's not completely unreasonable. But people who are lazy, right? So many times I get clients that come and they go, that if you use corrections or if you use force, that you're a lazy trainer or that you're a lazy dog owner, right? And I have seen that. I've seen people that they say, my dog's great. He's fine. He doesn't need any training. So I say, what are you calling me for? And they go, well, I just need him to stop lunging at people. And that's the only thing. What tool can I buy that gets him to stop lunging at things? Or what, how many sessions would it take for him to just stop lunging? Right. And so there is kind of this idea that, there's a problem. We can get a tool or we can, get a certain type of training to just fix that problem immediately. But again, it's usually people think that you can kind of extinguish a behavior and they don't necessarily understand how much work and how many variables go into actually the shaping of certain behaviors. Okay.